Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for joining us for our final Udall workshop. Today we will be discussing the application as well as the essay component. So without any further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. So to start off with, something that we haven't covered yet is the overall interests that a good Udall applicant should have and should be focusing on for their application and essay. So because the application and fellowship is open for individuals who have an interest in the environment, tribal policy, Native American healthcare, those are the areas that you should be focusing on, of course, on your application materials. The fellowship is open to individuals who are interested in any of these three topics. So you do not have to have an interest or experience or background in all three. However, if you do, that's obviously always a plus, but it does have to be at least one of these items. So of course, with the environment, those folks interested in conservation and environmental issues, especially when it comes to public policy, tribal policy, so focusing on those areas of public policy affecting and influencing Native Americans and Alaska Natives, and of course, Native American healthcare, so focusing on healthcare related issues for individuals who are Native American, Indigenous, and Alaska Natives. And of course, the application focus, so the application, for the application, you're going to want to focus on your three main areas. So your leadership potential, so any of your experiences that related to those three topics that we just talked about. Really focusing on any volunteer opportunities, extracurricular, co-curricular, and internships, even past job experiences, where you've held a leadership position focusing on one of those areas. Really showing not only your ability to identify issues in those areas, but your desire and to solve those problems, solve those issues, and really make a difference and make an impact in those three areas. Of course, community engagement. So again, making sure to focus on your community engagement activities related to one or more of those issues around the environment or Native American and Indigenous interests. So, again, if you've had any kind of volunteer experience, co-curricular, extracurricular experiences, maybe serving in a student group, serving in a volunteer capacity with an organization or a nonprofit or NGO, or serving, if you've had an internship with any government agencies that are covering those topics. Of course, the Interior is the Department of the Interior is, one of the biggest areas of that. But of course, there are other government agencies that are that impact these three areas. And then, of course, your goals. So anytime that we're talking about our goals, we want to make sure that they are clearly defined in relation to the fellowship application. So, if you have not only had past experiences that are related to these three areas, but also this is your one or more of these areas is part of your career plan or career goals moving forward, whether that's at the local scale, at the local level, state level, federal level, or even on a global scale. You want to be talking about those goals that you have for yourself and how this fellowship will impact your ability to meet those goals. So you need to show that you are committed to those career choices or committed to that career plan, sharing your hopes and goals for not only yourself, but what impact you hope to make, again, at any of those levels in your career. And being as specific as possible. So it is very easy to talk about these issues on a global scale because, or in some ways, because you are speaking to a really general goal. Being as specific as possible is going to be very, very important to help you set yourself apart from other applicants. And showing your thought process. Always, I know that we've talked about this before, but always, always, always showing your thought process as you are responding to any of these questions and as you are listing out or responding to and sharing your plans for the future. The application itself, I know that we've shared this in the past, but I wanted to make sure, because this is our final workshop, that we are reviewing it again. So as a reminder, that it is an 8-question application packet. You will answer these questions and upload your essay in the Udall portal on their website. We will give you access. So once you've started your account and started your application, it will get pinged to our office, and I will go in and allow you to access the full application. If you have any trouble with that, always, anytime that you are using an external portal of any kind, always email us, because we will have a campus rep portal that we are utilizing in order to gain access to your application materials. And so, always make sure to reach out to us in addition to reaching out to the foundation itself or organization to ensure that it's not a troubleshooting error on their end, things of that nature, and making sure to always cover your bases. But again, you're going to submit your application and your essay into their portal. Your letters of recommendation should be emailed by your recommenders to us at fellowships@georgetown.edu. And the email address, if you don't already have it, will be at the end of this presentation. So with the application packet, you'll be covering the following areas: your professional aspirations. So again, those goals that you have for yourself throughout your career. Your leadership experience. So again, sharing those experiences that you have had where you have held a leadership position and made an impact or influence in one of these areas or in your area of expertise. Clarifying experience. So any experiences that maybe have not been or are not obvious to the reader on your resume or in your transcripts, or you want to make sure that you are always clarifying any additional experience that you've had that is related to this fellowship. Public service or community experience. So these are going to be experiences that maybe you didn't hold a leadership position, right? Maybe you were not on the board or in a position of authority or power, but you volunteered your time and expertise, and you've learned something from that experience that again made an impact on the broader community. And again, we covered the leadership and public service questions in our last workshop. But again, just as a reminder, these are going to be experiences that impact a large portion of the community that make a very broad impact. And so this is going to be a much larger scale than, say, volunteering for a student organization or something that is just impacting maybe your campus community or your local neighborhood. You're going to be looking at a much larger scale. If you're looking at the local scale, you're going to be looking at something that is affecting your city or town at large, or your county or your state, or maybe even larger, right? So thinking about those experiences that have had an impact on the larger scale of your local, state, community, again, focusing on areas of the environment, tribal policy, or healthcare related to Indigenous populations. And then all the additional information that is often included in these application packets, right? So like your biographical information, as well as any other information that they need on you in order to identify you, etc. The essay is an 800-word essay, which we'll be going over in just a second in more detail. But in your essay, you will be discussing a significant speech, act, book, or public policy statement by one of the Udall brothers, the fellowship is named after, that impacts, and its impact on your field of study, your interest, and your career goals. So what is something that one of these brothers did in their own lifetimes that has made a substantial and significant impact on you and your goals and all of those things that culminate your goals? So, of course, your transcripts for the internal application, unofficial transcripts are always fine for the internal application, but always remember that for the external deadline in March, you will absolutely need your official transcripts. As soon as fall grades are finalized, you want to request your official transcripts. You want to make sure that you have your most up-to-date transcript. So as soon as you get back in the spring, or as soon as fall grades are finalized, go ahead and request your official transcripts from the registrar's office, and do it as soon as possible after fall grades have been finalized, because it can take a little bit for those transcripts to get to you. If you are on campus in the spring, you can pop into the registrar's office and pick them up, or you can have them mailed to you if you're not going to be on campus in the spring. Especially if you're getting them mailed to you, absolutely do that as soon as possible, because it can take quite a bit of time to get to you. Reminder is that, the effects of the pandemic on the mail systems here in the United States are still a little wonky. So always make sure that you're taking that into account. And then finally, your 3 letters of recommendation. So these should be from individuals who can speak to, again, these experiences that you've had. Absolutely, you want to have at least one faculty member who can speak to your academic abilities, but also having folks that can speak to your leadership experiences or public service experiences are going to be very, very important. So remember to ask that of folks. The rule of thumb is to ask someone or ask individuals for letters of recommendation no more than 3, or I should say no less than 3 weeks in advance. So that's really now, especially with the holidays. So you want to be reaching out to folks who can serve as a recommender for you really as soon as possible if you haven't already. So go ahead and get on that. And again, they will email those directly to us at fellowships@georgetown.edu. So the essay, as I said, so the essay is 800 words or less, again, discussing a significant speech, legislative act, book, public policy statement by Congressman Morris K. Udall or Secretary of Interior Stuart L. Udall, and its impact on your field of study, your interest in your career goals. So if you're not familiar with either of these 2 individuals, which at this point I hope that you are, but if not, make sure to go and really do your research on both of these individuals. Seeing some of the pieces of their work that can fit well with what you have with your current experiences, of course, but always also being genuine, right? You may have even read something of theirs and not realized it, right? Or maybe misremembered, especially if it's something that you've read a few years ago. So going back, seeing some of the work that they have done, and really doing a deep dive into their work to see what their experiences matches up to yours. So the purpose of the essay in any fellowship application. It's not a test of your knowledge of what these individuals have done, but really shows how you think about these issues. So it shows the readers and the foundation what your thought process is like. How are you connecting the work of these two individuals to your own experiences, and how you can kind of continue to reflect on that work and how it impacts you. It also speaks to your own philosophy of change and leadership, as well as your approaches. So you want to be showing, anytime you're writing any kind of application essay, you want to always show your experiences. You don't want to just tell and list out your past experiences. You want to show the impact that you've made, describing in detail, or as much detail as possible in 800 words or less, the impact that the particular work that you have chosen has had on you, and how it has influenced your philosophies around leadership. The essay also shows your understanding of critical issues in your field. It is very easy, if you are not clear and don't provide a good clarification of your particular stance on the specific issue that you've chosen, right? So if you, for example, are speaking about access to water or access to clean, safe drinking water for individuals, whether here in the United States or abroad, but definitely here in the United States. You know, if you are not talking about all of the different intersections of that issue and how it is important and why, obviously why it is important, and the potential approaches to fix that problem, if you just simply state, you know, that access to clean water is important, just like that, it's not going to get you anywhere. Giving a deep dive into your understanding of the topic, of the issue at hand, giving a good overview of your suggested approaches. All of these things are going to be important to show how you think critically about this issue. And that's what the readers are going to be looking for. They're more looking to see, how are you thinking about this issue? How are you thinking about the potential approaches? How are you thinking about all of the adjacent issues that also impact your particular issue that you're talking about? And really showing your ability to think through this issue. And then finally, it's of course going to demonstrate how you carry on the legacy of the Udall brothers. If you're just joining us, we're just getting through the essay portion. Thank you so much again for joining us. So just to continue on. So identifying sources. I know it can seem a little simple, but because you're looking specifically at works that the Udall brothers have taken part in their lives, the University of Arizona Special Collections actually has really good resources on both of the brothers and their background, books that they've written, legislative acts that they took part in or introduced, as well as speeches of theirs. And so if you go to the University of Arizona Special Collections website, which I have listed here, you can actually find a lot of their information very, very easily. And so that way you don't have to go searching all around the internet trying to find a good source for your essay. So things to consider always, these are just get general guidelines, not specifically for this essay, but for all fellowship application essays. You want to be specific with your content, right? So making sure to outline your essay, especially with something as short as 800 words or less. You want to make sure that you are giving yourself a good outline so that you're hitting all of your main points. Again, because it is so short, the quality of your writing is going to be very important. If you're writing and if your language is very staid or not engaging in any way, then it is going to, it's not going to make as much of an impact on your reader. And so making sure to keep your language engaging is going to be very, very important. Critical analysis. You're not just summarizing whichever of the pieces that you've selected from one of these individuals' works. You really need to give a deep dive of the work that you've selected and how it is relevant to your career. It's not just talking about the work that you've selected or even the impact that that work has had on policy, United States policy overall. It is how that has influenced your learning, your goals, and your career trajectory. So you really need to lean into why this is important to you, and show the reader why it is important to you, because that gives them a better understanding of you and your goals. So by really leaning into that, making connections to key aspects of whichever of their works that you've chosen, is going to be incredibly important. And then, of course, always a freshness of perspective, and providing an original perspective on the issue that you've selected. So making sure that you're incorporating new ideas, new thoughts. Don't be afraid of incorporating something that maybe is a little bit is a newer perspective, especially given the way that these issues have evolved over time since these two individuals served in their respective positions. Always being able to provide that perspective will help, or I should say, being able to provide that perspective is going to show how you can critically think about this issue. So strategy, what is your, really thinking about the angle that you're approaching your topic. So identifying a central theme. So obviously you will have your topic at hand after having selected the book, policy, speech, whichever of one of the Udall brothers. But what is your main topic, right? The topic is not going to be the work, right? The work is going to be connected to your topic instead. So your topic again is going to be something from those three areas that the fellowship covers. So a key issue within the environment, a key issue within Native American or Indigenous policies, or a key issue affecting Native American healthcare. And so thinking about your approaches to that specific issue and connecting it to the work that you've selected. And then also connecting it, of course, to your own interests, your own approaches, your own philosophies. So the key things really that we're thinking about is, one, what is your topic? What is your issue at hand? Two, how is it connected to the specific work that you've selected from these two individuals' background and experiences? And three, how does it connect to your goals overall? And then speaking to the applications of those issues and how you will use these approaches in your work in the future, right? So obviously right now you're a college student, you were applying for this fellowship, and but how will this work help propel you forward? And how will this work help you in the future, down the line after you've graduated, after you've gotten your job, your first job, what is it about these particular issues that are going to propel you forward? So we have an example here of a past essay. So I'm going to go ahead and read aloud. If you are watching our recording, you can go ahead and pause and read for yourself. And then we'll go back and kind of go through some things that this individual did well. So this is over 2 slides. So I'll read this slide, read the next slide, and then we'll kind of go back and review. So, and this is just selections from a past essay. This is not the entire essay. In the environment at Valley Forge, Congressman Morris K. Udall called for a revitalization of the environmental movement, which he argued could only be accomplished through greater inclusivity. Congressman Udall recognized that those who are socially and economically marginalized suffer most from environmental degradation, an injustice that is still at play today. Therefore, he understood that the future of sustainable development depends on transitioning to a new framework in which inclusivity is central. Congressman Udall recognized that the social problems facing minority and lower income Americans, such as neighborhood toxicity, should be a priority of the environmental movement. Social inclusion to Congressman Udall was not merely necessary in order to achieve environmental goals, but also change the very character of the goals that environmentalists were fighting for. He wrote, "Conservation is not a piece of wilderness here, a wildlife refuge there. It is a celebration of life in its totality." For him, the environmental agenda needed to better all components of human life. To Congressman Udall, ensuring inclusivity was a responsibility of the leaders of the environmental movement, with whom he called upon to educate the sectors of society that had been left out of the conservation agenda. While this was a pragmatic strategy at the time, now it is necessary to include all vulnerable populations and communities, not only as people to be helped and educated in the environmental movement, but also as partners and leaders in conservation. Current best practice in sustainable development in Latin America, for example, demonstrates that participatory planning results in creative solutions uniquely suited to the community, which have longer lasting impacts than top-down development strategies. Community buy-in is thus imperative in order to achieve positive environmental results. I hope to build upon Udall's thinking on inclusivity in the environmental movement and create community-based grassroots action rather than top-down change. Due to the transitional consequences of climate change, I have chosen the international sphere as the arena in which I want to enact environmental change. I see enormous potential for communities to engage in reforestation and ecological agricultural projects in Latin America in particular, and in the future as a regional manager for the Nature Conservancy or a similar organization. I hope to facilitate sustainable land use projects through establishing partnerships between communities, governments, and private actors. I will help to provide both information on scientific best practices and financial resources through governmental and private partnerships to communities. I will engage multiple stakeholders in implementing results-driven initiatives, such as water-efficient agricultural projects and legally protected wilderness areas that allow traditional communities to continue subsistence practices. I witnessed specific examples of exciting progress in sustainable development in Brazil, where governmental and nonprofit efforts to conserve the Amazon rainforest are often carried out in collaboration with indigenous communities, simultaneously enabling these communities to continue their traditional ways of life based upon the rainforest ecosystem and contributing to the global effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. In this way, local changes can create positive global change and thus place environmentalism on international agendas. So if you are watching the recording, go ahead and review, pause, read, and pick out any areas that you think the individual did well, or things that they could have changed. Obviously, this is an example of a successful application. And so, this did get through and receive the fellowship. However, there's always room for improvement. If you've joined us and are interested in reviewing, or if you've noticed anything that the writer did well or could have done better, feel free to unmute yourself, and you can we can have that discussion.
I guess I was just wondering, in terms of specificity of these essays, like the sort of stuff that the program is looking for. Like, for example, I know like this essay has like a specific goal in mind, like, community-based grassroots action. But it's not like they're proposing, I want to have X policy, XYZ policy passed that I think would be like useful or pragmatic. So I was just like wondering, is it better to be like as pinpoint specific as possible if there is, like, say I want to talk about the effects of hydraulic fracking and how it oftentimes tears apart a lot of indigenous communities, or like dredging in the context of DC has been like a practice that has like really like led to a lot of ecological like consequences, quite literally, like like DC Wharf was created through like dredging practices that just created acres of land out of like what was water before. And like there are a lot of consequences to that. So it could be something that could very specifically be analyzed, but it's not like, as a broader scale as saying community-based organizing in Latin America, which could mean a lot more things. So I was just wondering what the...
Yeah, definitely. So I will say it's going to depend a little bit on a couple of different things. One, like which of, so as we chatted about before, I want to go back, is the essay, of course, is you discussing like a significant speech, legislative act, book, public policy that either Congressman Udall or Secretary Udall, published or gave, and thus its impacts on your field of study and your career goals, right? And so for this particular essay, the writer took the congressman's speech and kind of, I don't want to say like sort of cherry on the cake of like the point that they were trying to make, like they incorporated it very well. But you want to make sure that whatever your focus is, that you're connecting it as closely as possible to one of their works. In terms of like what is the outcome and what is the, what should you be focusing on, you're not really writing like a policy proposal, right? So you want to speak more to your overall goals and plans for your own career and connecting them to one of their speeches, books, etc. For this particular person, right, they talk about their goal to potentially, working for the Nature Conservancy, or really working in the area of land use projects and sustainable land use projects. And so thinking about what your goals are and incorporating your particular goals into your essay is like really where you're going to be making that impact and showing your connections to one of the brothers' works. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. So you're not really writing a policy proposal. Really, you're talking about what is a specific issue within environmentalism, within the environmental policy, within tribal policy, within like issues related to Native American healthcare, and how do those issues, how are those issues connected to your goals, and how are they also connected to the works that the brothers did during their own careers, right? So you're kind of connecting three different things. You're connecting their work, you're connecting your work, really through the issue that you've selected, and there are a lot of issues, as I said, or as we said earlier, you don't have to be covering all three of those issues. You can pick just one. Of course, if you pick a topic or have worked towards or are working on or connected to a topic that does affect all of those areas, that's great. You know, I think you made you suggest, you know, you talked about fracking and the impact that that has on Native communities and obviously also on the environment, and can also obviously have impacts on the health and well-being of Indigenous communities. And so that obviously that is something that covers all three. But if you're talking about something, you don't have to cover all three. If you do, that's great. That's fantastic, because it's going to just help to you're hitting all of the topics that are covered in the fellowship, but you don't have to. In terms of this essay, I think they could have spoken a little bit more to Indigenous communities in the Amazon. I know that they do here in this section of the essay. I think they could have done a little bit more of that to really help drive the point home about about the impacts that these processes or practices have. But I think they definitely use a really good angle on using sustainable practices, especially when it comes to individuals not from that country, right? So if this person's talking about Brazil, right? If you are someone from the United States coming in, even through an NGO or a nonprofit, you're still an outsider coming into a different country or another country, and providing sustainable practices are going to be much, much more important than just saying like, here's an idea and a solution that might not work overall, especially like once that NGO has left, or once that group has left. And so talking about sustainable land use practices is a really good angle to come at with this particular or for this particular essay. So any thoughts on the essay piece?
Yeah, I guess in terms of the essay specifically, I was thinking it was interesting, I guess, like how they'd taken, or I was thinking a little bit about the piece that they'd chosen from Udall itself. So like, are most people, or is it similar to people usually using like speeches, I guess, in order to justify whatever their essay piece is going to be about? It seems, at least in this case, that the focus was just using Udall's like statement here as a conduit to sort of like talk about something related to it, but not exactly the same as what he was talking about.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and so it worked in this person's case, right? Because this is an example of a successful, an essay from a successful application. It worked in this person's case. The key thing is making sure that it is as related as possible, right? Like, you obviously don't want to go and take a speech or work or a policy that they enacted and just sort of like throw it in there just for good measure to say like, hey, here, I'm meeting one of the requirements of this essay. You absolutely want to make sure that it is connected to the work that you are, or to your work or your issue. And the closer related it is the better, right? This person made it work, and did a good job of kind of weaving in the pieces of Udall's narrative into their own narrative. But the closer the speech or book or policy that you select is the closer it's connected, it's going to be a lot more. It's going to just strengthen your essay a lot more, right? I think for this particular essay, it works because his speech at Valley Forge was speaking specifically on the ways that the environment impacts economically marginalized communities more than other communities that are maybe economically more advantaged. And so it's not unrelated, right? And you're not necessarily going to be able to find the perfect essay or policy or book or speech that will, fit like a puzzle piece into your own topic. But at the same time, you don't want to pick a topic that is something that you're unfamiliar with just because it's something that they spoke about. So finding that balance of, this is the issue that I'm the most familiar with, that I'm the most passionate about, that I am excited about, that I've been working towards, and balancing that with, let's find something that is connected to or fits well with this topic is really what you're going for. Like ideally, you would pick something that you had previously read that made an impact on you. And so that way you're not just like picking something and sort of shoehorning it in. But regardless of sort of what approach you kind of come at it from, making sure that the speech, policy, et cetera, fits well with your issue. In terms of like what people pick, it's very dependent on how familiar they are with either Congressman Udall or Secretary Udall's work, and whether or not, whether or not it fits well, right? Whatever the content of the work from one of the brothers like fits well with their topic. So the short answer is people pick a lot of different things. The key though is making sure that it fits with your topic that you're discussing.
Got it. That makes sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, in this case, like there's more to the essay that we're missing. And so there's also, other ways that they're working the congressman's speech into the essay. This is just part of the essay, but I think they did a good job of connecting and especially like pulling out specific quotes and making connections between the congressman's speech and the work that they want to do. It flows really nicely, and they use this middle paragraph as a nice sort of transition between the first paragraph talking about the congressman and the second paragraph talking about, I should say the third paragraph talking about their particular focus and their career goals. So that's definitely a good approach to use, especially if it complements your writing style. As a quick reminder, because realizing that we're almost at time, nope, I apologize, this is incorrect. The internal deadline is January 24th. And then nominees will be notified in early February, so waiting to hear back about specific dates. And the external deadline is in early March, and then scholars will be announced in April. I actually have to double check if these dates are still correct, but it's 5 days in August as part of an orientation. Typically is in Tucson, Arizona, though with the pandemic and COVID-19 and travel restrictions, it may be via Zoom. So there is always a scholar orientation in August. So the internal deadline though is January 24th. My apologies on that. So January 24th, not the 22nd. And so if you're watching the recording, thank you for joining us. Definitely check out our fellowship toolkits and email us at fellowships@georgetown.edu if you have any questions. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. So thank you again for joining us. And then we'll have a little bit of time for questions for folks that joined us live.